Hello people, we are going to look today at a very simple consent form that people are often asked to sign, particularly if your children are at a school or some sort of daycare service, or they're going on a school trip or some sort of outing, whatever it may be. You're quite often asked to sign a consent form to treat minor children. Okay, I'll just drag this off the internet, so there's nothing in particular. It's just a random form that I managed to find. There's many examples there for you to look at, and I'm sure if you were to look at some of these, you would discover some themes that would appear. Particularly here, I chose this one because it's got good use of capitalization, some lovely blank spaces for you to use. Signatures required, a nice box text, which is quite interesting, and then some further details down the bottom, which is quite curious. But essentially, so the situation is, your kid's off in your baby goat is off in daycare, and they want to take it out to the museum or the park, and therefore they're liable. Obviously, they have legal custody, or maybe even in some respects they have lawful custody of your little ones while they're in the care of some sort of organisation that provides such a daycare service. And so in order for them to take and carry off what would be determined as being property, they need your consent. Okay, that's fine, but this is more in relation to a medical treatment. So quite often nowadays they get you to sign a consent form for do you allow us to take your bundle of joy, as it's sometimes referred to, off to the park or the museum, and if we do have an accident, could you please sign this medical consent form, so that should we need to take your little one to obviously the unfortunate or rare circumstance that they have an accident, then they can take your little one to the hospital, and then they give you this kind of form to sign as a side note to the main idea of taking your little one out on an excursion. So again, we're looking at this very simply just to see how it's laid out and how the use of capitalization is going to work. And also here, second most important line is, please print all information. Printing information would turn the information you put onto this form, as the way that I see it, would be subordinate to the creator of this document. So I, John Smith, for example, capitalized, being subordinate in a way to the requirements of this form, or at least of what they're asking you to put your status at as the parent or legal guardian. Now, I've talked about parent in numerous videos. If you go on a golf course and you get an even hole, par literally means par, equal, equality in some respects. So, how many shots did you do that golf hole in? I did a 3, and it was a par 3. Par 3, it was a 3. I did it 3 shots. I'm equal. Right, evens. You're not up, you're not down, you're equals. So that's what par is, and ent is pertaining to. So the pertaining of some sort of equality. Obviously, I'm not a legal person. I didn't invent the word parent, but the term parent here is obviously very gender neutral. Anything could be a parent, technically speaking, or could claim to be a parent in the legal context. And also here they have the legal guardian, so some sort of guardian via a written agreement or some sort of contract, or even a court order could determine, or even by abandonment you could become the legal guardian. So they're not determining here whether they're not interested necessarily if you're the mother or father. They're taking it into like the secular world of, right, you're going to be a parent, i.e. have like some sort of equality of status to this. I'm kind of hypothesizing the state or the school, or it would probably be the state as a whole. So you put your name in as legal guardian of, I don't know, some kid born on some day, do hereby consent to any medical care and administration of anesthesia. All right, so that's anesthesia being anesthetic. Is that like painkillers? Excuse me, I'm not a doctor either. Determined by a physician, right? Okay, to be necessary for the welfare of my child, while said child, that's good, very nice terminology there, I like using the word said child, is under the care of such and such, and I'm not reasonably available by telephone to give consent. There we go. And this authorization is effective from and to. That's good, because you don't really want it's almost like a power of attorney in a way. It's a very specific power of attorney. it's always good to have an end date. You know, quite a lot of things have a 12-month life cycle in terms of these agreements. They have to be renewed unless you want something to go on into perpetuity, if that's the right word. So the signature of parent or legal guardian, and then that would be presumably your big Hancock right there. And then the witness, I don't know why this particular form has a witness, but it's interesting. So they've got a witness's signature, and you have the witness's name. Please print, very much like you would with any other kind of legal document. Someone has to verify that they were there to see you sign it and can testify that it was you who signed it, so that there can be no disputing. Oh, I didn't sign that, you know, that kind of nonsense. And then in the four corner rule, the box here, this consent form should be taken with the child to the hospital or physician's office when the child is taken for treatment. Now that's interesting, isn't it? So this form is obviously giving some sort of aid or assistance to the medical profession in order to do what they need to do. This additional information will assist in treatment if it can be furnished with the consent, but is not required. Okay, it's not required because they can't force you to. Then you've got your family address, your father's phone number, and a mother. So now we're actually talking about mother and father. But hang on a minute, up here we're talking about a parent. So if you were being adopted, you're not necessarily the father or mother as such, or if you're the legal guardian, you're not necessarily going to be able to fill in that section. Child's birthday and the last tetanus, so I can understand that, and any allergies to drugs or food, which is also very helpful should you take them in to a hospital, or a third party will be taking your little one into a hospital and they're looking at giving pain relief. It's good to know if you're allergic to, was it morphine or opioids, whatever they call it. So that's interesting. Now this is going back to my previous video where I related to the very lovely term of necessity, because I don't know if any of you noticed, but this word actually appeared on that little form. But we're not going to go back to that because we're going to go on. So Oliver Cromwell, a revolutionary man who very much had an impactful effect upon the Commonwealth and the nations that were born from England and the Commonwealth as a whole. And he put down here, necessity has no law. Necessity. And I was like, that's a very scary concept coming from a revolutionary who also had a hand in executing, presumably in his eyes, a treacherous king. So the monarch, he's actually had a hand in the execution of the monarch of the time as a word, and how it comes about being so powerful. So necessity is a need. You know, a need is what I've discussed with someone else about being a very big want. Yeah, so you know, I could want a Ferrari, but I need a car. You know, I need to get to A to B. So literally, a need is I'll take a bicycle. To be honest with you, I just need to get moving. Yeah, so that's a need. So needed, required, essential, indispensable, and also down here, necessary is actually a word for a toilet, private parts, genitalia, or lavatory, and that's I believe in French. So the way that we would say, oh, do you have a restroom? You know. I suppose in French culture, it's like, oh, do you have I need to go to where is necessary. Where can I go where is necessary to do my business? So that's probably like a literal translation. But obviously you can see where, hey, where can I go for the restroom? Hey, I've got some necessary business I need to take care of. Where can I go for that? So, but back to the English version, it's like required has come up here. So required is obviously a word that anyone who's been listening to Carl Lentz over the years is obviously by right and authority. So a necessary is by right and authority. So it's almost in the same vein as required. Urgent, compelling, unavoidable, indispensable. From unavoidable, indispensable, no backing away. That's interesting. So it's, in that respect, your back's against the wall. You've got to do what is necessary, which is quite powerful when you think about it as a single word. And it kind of means it gives you an almost free will, unavoidable, needed or required, determined by prior conditions or circumstances. So the circumstances that someone or something finds himself in deems it necessary and almost in some respects inevitable that the course of action that needs to be taken is going to be taken. Logically inevitable. There's another one. It's going to happen. I'm going to have to do this because, if I don't do it, something worse is going to happen, whether to myself or my fellow man. Again, Carl Lentz has mentioned about a red stoplight. These things are, you're at a junction, it's got a red light. And I think Carl said about you see a lorry going out of control behind you, coming down the hill behind you, is going to crash into you, but you can't go forward because there's a red stop sign in front of you, and you're breaking the highway code or whatever it is if you go through the red stop sign. Or a police car's flashing his lights behind you in traffic, and you're like, well, I can't move, mate, because the red light's on. So this is where the law of necessity comes in. It says, well, if I've got a police car behind me, it's necessary to do what I can to get out of the way so that man can fulfill his duty to the public service, whether it's an ambulance, fire engine, police, whatever, so that they can get about their day and do what they need to do. So yeah, as long as you're doing it in a safe manner, obviously, and this is why it's necessary to do what you need to do at that particular time. And then from the cops' point of view, or they need to do what's necessary to get past you. So it's a bit of it's an interesting word, necessity. But I like the definition here about it's like a required by obligation. Right, here we go. So an obligation. So that was recently brought up in the terrorist attack on Westminster Bridge, where the guy was running over in a vehicle, all the people on the bridge, gets out of the car when he crashes it into the barrier, and then runs into the Westminster Palace to try and kill as many people as he can with knives. And he ended up being confronted by two officers. One officer ran off to get help, and the other officer was left pretty much on his own with nothing but his bare hands and possibly a truncheon to try and defend himself from a dual dagger wielding nutter. And it was found out later that someone who was relevantly high up in the police force actually ran away from the scene and locked himself in the car, citing the fact that he was ill-equipped to deal with such a situation. And I think Palmer, the officer killed, was called P.C. Palmer, and he unfortunately lost his life by being ill-equipped, but still doing his obligation and his duty to protect the public and the Houses of Parliament and all those brave souls within from the actions of a crazy person. Yeah, so that's where your obligation requires you, because you've bound yourself, you've agreed to the terms of the obligation, or being paid for it, like in a police officer's state. Then you have to compel or be have a compulsion in order to act in a certain way. So that's why it's necessary for you to do something in accordance to your obligations, and that's also a very interesting. So it's very much you've got to do what you've got to do when something arises, whether it's by obligation, duty, or just because of self-preservation is another thing as well. That's a very important concept to understand. So this also fills back into what was said here about necessity has no law. So when crazy things are going on, like P.C. Palmer, he's got a guy running at him with knives. He's going, holy crap, I didn't sign up for this, but I have to deal with it. No one ever signs up to be attacked with knives and stuff, but hey, that's where you are. You're the officer in that situation. What are you going to do? You're going to run away like another guy did, or you're going to stand and do your best? And obviously doing your best in this case cost him his life, so you can't fault his performance of his duty there. As they like to say, he made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. So this is interesting. So we're going to look at the most revolutionary of all documents, following on from our good friend Oliver Cromwell, who was well aware of the word necessary. And then, I don't know, you probably can't see this quite as well as it should be. Boom, there we go. So this is in Congress. This is the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. There we are. So it's not the states now; they're now united. And this document is really worth a read by anyone, because it's a point in time. And to quote Henry Ford again, all history is bunk, as in nonsense. But this is a recorded piece of bunk in that respect, that actually is relating to a point in time of, very scary for these people to do this. They're going up against the whole crown, they're going against the will of the king, They're going to sign their death. They sign it. All these people who are being signed here are putting their name to essentially what on the other side of the fence would be deemed as treason. So all these English people have decided, right, we're going to have to separate ourselves from being English and subjects of the realm. We are now going to go independent, and we're going to go it alone. And if it all went horribly wrong, guess who are the first people who get hanged? By the neck. All of these people. So there was definitely an air of fear and trepidation about doing this. But I read it, I think it's on the right hand side here, but in here it's all about what's necessary. It's necessary for the people when they find themselves confronted by such despotism, that it's necessary to act. Nay, I think it even says, nay, you have a duty to act where despotism becomes so oppressive to your rights to get justice from the powers that be. And that word necessity or necessary was actually put in this document in order for the justification of their need and their duty and their right to establish themselves as a new nation that had no binding, if you like, isn't bound in any way to the old world, the old empire and the England and the Britain that they were choosing to leave. So again, that's where necessary forms. It's almost a revolutionary term. So when they send it to you back to the school daycare arena, it's almost like a lazy use of the word necessary, just in order to get a catch-all category word. That means whatever's deemed necessary by the physician for the welfare of my child, while said child is under the care of blah 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 blah. And I am not reasonably, that's another word that's been mentioned by Carl Lentz in his talk shows, oh come on, let's be reasonable about this. No, let's not be reasonable about this. Available by telephone to get consent, okay? So again, reasonable is in the eye of the beholder. It's very subjective. What one person determines to be as reasonable course of action, another person may not deem being a reasonable course of action. What one physician might deem to be necessary in order to save your bundle of joy from death may not be necessary in another doctor's or another physician's treatment practice in terms of saving the child. You could end up with experimental treatment. I mean, I'm obviously talking about extremes here, but we're dealing with a very extreme word. We've got to save this child. What are we going to do? Oh, we need to amputate both the legs off. All right, we need to save this child. What are we going to do? Well, we need an organ donor straight away. We don't have any organ donors. Yeah, but we've got this new, revolutionary new treatment where we've grown organs in the lab, and it's good to go. Boom, in you go with a fake heart. You never know, because you can't contact the parents, so there's no network signal. There could all kinds of eventualities fall into this term necessary, and now parents, guardians, mothers and fathers, uncles and aunts, grandparents and grandfathers are being asked to sign these documents without fully understanding the legal nature or the power of these words that they're committing themselves to. And this is why I thought, well, isn't it interesting that something as simple as like, yeah, we're going on a day trip, and we need you to sign this form, otherwise your kid's not going, or whatever, whatever extortative ultimatums that they give you. Or if you don't sign a consent form for medical treatment, little Jimmy's being left in a classroom on his own, being glum and sad. But I would like to put it to you like this: these forms weren't always around, and they certainly weren't around when I was growing up. And I'm like, well, if you were a teacher and you were out and about with a load of kids, taking them to the park or the museum or whatever, and someone fell over and broke their leg, something quite simple, would you not take them to the hospital anyway? It's not like, well, we didn't sign a consent form, we can't take them to the hospital. But this is where the law of necessity comes in anyway. Because, okay, a major whoopsie has happened and we're now liable privately as an organisation or as an individual, depending on what the circumstances are. But essentially, let's put liability and insurance claims to one side. You would take, as a teacher or a carer, you would take that kid to hospital to get help. I'm sure everyone can agree with that. So this form is not about the act of taking the kid to the hospital to seek help. This is about, once your kid is now at hospital, in order for the hospital to do anything to this kid, is now I'm presuming this is in strict liability terms of it. We're talking about, okay, fantastic, the hospital's now got this kid in front of them, And you'd say, well, who's it responsible for this little child, this kid, whatever it may be? And this is the point. Well, you as the healthcare the daycare provider or the school or the teacher or the educational provider, you are responsible for it anyway. Yeah. So now, if the teacher says, yeah, I've tried calling the parents, I can't get hold of them, but obviously he's there, he's in pain, he needs some sort of pain relief, he needs his leg fixing up. So the doctor say, well, do you know if he's allergic to anything? I'm afraid I don't know, doctor. Okay, well, I know how to fix a leg, but I don't know if he's allergic to anything. So then it'll be up to the healthcare professionals to do whatever they do to determine if you are or aren't allergic to something, presumably. But, when you add this contract, well, this is a contract, and you add this contract in where it's necessary for the doctor to do whatever he can. Well, if the doctor says, well, he's in so much pain, it's necessary to administrate pain straight away, does that take away his duty of care in order for him to check if you're now allergic to some sort of medication? I mean, people die from reaction to drugs all the time. And now that it was necessary because he was obviously in a position where they couldn't contact the next of kin, and he's in a position where the child's screaming in agony, and he just says, look, I administrated morphine or whatever it was, and unfortunately the kid had a bad reaction to it, but it was necessary at the time. Yeah, and now you've signed a necessary waiver form, essentially, saying, yeah, well, the doctor's free to do whatever he deems necessary at the time. Now, when they show this against you for any compensation or payout claims, you can see, well, the parent did agree to complete medical wavering for whatever the physician deemed was necessary at the time. Yeah, so I'm just saying this is quite a significant piece of paperwork that people are signing away without, at a whim, and maybe they don't fully understand what the implications of the word necessary are. I mean, it's the only word on there that you have to worry about, and then you've got reasonably and stuff like that. You've got the capitalization of the titles that you're being given, and the fact that they're witnessing it. Someone's witnessing you sign this confession. Just look at it as a confession. And it's like, wow, this is quite a powerful piece of kit in the defence of the medical profession. I presume that's the end user, because I can't see if you're a teacher, you're going to take the kid to school, to hospital anyway. You are, aren't you? You're going to run down there as quick as you're going to call an ambulance, whatever it may be. But now it's like, okay, we've now got this little bundle of joy at the hospital. Now the hospital has to be liable. It's about protecting, is what I'm seeing. I mean, I may be wrong in this. I'm not I'm not a legal lawyer in relation to what the strict legal sense of this is, but I'm very, very suspicious about it. And this is something I have great issue with. And say, well, why am I signing this? Because let's forget about the form. If he did fall down the stairs, what are you saying? You wouldn't take him to hospital? No, you would take him to hospital. Yeah, you would. So what does this form actually do? And then if you took him to hospital and you couldn't get in contact with him for some reason, what are you saying? That you're going to refuse treatment? Now there's a liability issue there. So, well, I can't treat him because no one's responsible for him. Because the daycare is responsible for him, because you turned over your property to the daycare for convenience sake, for example, for education, for some sort of benefit. So when that arrives at hospital, this is when this form kicks in, so that they can wave it in some medical professionals' face and say, yeah, we've got consent, do as you wish, do what's necessary, whatever it may be. And then at 5 o'clock when you pick your kid up, you've got a little RoboCop baby. Yeah, well, he needs to be injected with what was that stuff called? Juice, I don't know, was it spice? What do they call it? And he needs it 3 times a day, but he's great at law enforcement now, but he can only eat baby food, and he acts a bit weird. But apart from that, he's still alive. Little Timmy, little Johnny's still alive, a little bit robotic. Plug him in at night, charge up his batteries, and he's good to go. That's as ridiculous as this could be, which is why it's like using the full force of the legal profession, using one of the most all-encapturing liability words that there is, in order for you just to go on a simple trip with the school and to protect someone somewhere from some sort of liability or civil action for compensation for damages. It's just weird, and I think it's a bit overbearing on the simplicity. It's using a very legal, technical document for people who are just basically signing it willy-nilly because they just want their little kid to go on a little day trip somewhere. But lo and behold, if the worst was to happen, you're going to find this document will probably sting you in the arse more than anything.